Abandoned. Left to time's devices, lived in and left to collect dust. Yet despite the lack of life, these locations are all too familiar in our brains. Nostalgic even. Familiar places that seem to have once had life bustling throughout it are now desolate and seem to leave a feeling of discomfort, yet at the same time nostalgic warmth. Liminal is defined as a period of transitioning across boundaries and borders, which can be shown through the many doors defining a liminal space. Or perhaps liminality lies within your brain, between conscious and unconscious, the feeling of familiarity, yet complete uncertainty. Or perhaps it lies within planes of existence, stuck in the middle between planes of reality and imaginary. Take all of these feelings and try to think of a game that best represents these emotions. In my opinion, GMod lends itself as a perfect host to present the idea of liminality. So let's discuss that. Liminal spaces are special in the fact that they can elicit nearly any emotion. However, I believe that there are categories of liminal spaces that can give off certain emotions. That being light, neutral, and dark spaces, each harboring different types of moods such as pleasant familiarity, nostalgia, and fear. Though keep in mind, liminal spaces fall under a spectrum, meaning there can be a neutral space mixed with a dark space under the right circumstances, and things of that nature. Anyway, time to explain the categories and some of the more common places they are represented by, as well as the moods or memories they can bring up. Light liminal spaces can be reminiscent of arcades, bowling alleys, or roller rinks with neon lights, arcade machines, and carpeting that often looks like the fabric on old bus seats. For most, these liminal spaces can give off feelings of pleasant nostalgia of birthday parties or dates that were years, maybe decades ago. Also, these spaces don't exactly have to represent places of entertainment, as it could also just be a brightly lit forest or generally happy place. These light liminal spaces don't inherently have any negative or fearful aspects to them, and they're often colored with bright, cheerful colors with pleasant memories emanating from them, thus leaving them as a positive influence on the mind. Neutral liminal spaces are similar in that regard, however they don't immediately present a positive nature either. These spaces are often business or commercial oriented with their setting. This means you'll often see abandoned malls lit by sunlight, office spaces with mustard yellow carpeting, walls, and lighting, and the interiors with several bouts of furniture placed around. This could be a lone television on the floor, maybe a chair in the corner or center of the room, things of that variety. Neutral liminal spaces can also be represented with a foggy backyard with toys strewn about and a playset coated in condensation. Because there's no clear intent of causing the viewer any fear or pleasantries, this leaves it with the title of neutral. Dark liminal spaces are specifically designed to cause uncomfort and fear within the viewer. Dark spaces are often represented by doorways in which nothing but darkness can be seen, forests with glowing, peering eyes, and tree limbs that appear twisted and bloodthirsty, as well as generally dark-lit areas with silhouettes of a man or a monster residing within them. I should also mention pool and flooded liminal spaces. Kind of an outlier, but due to the indoor pools and an abundance of water being a common trope in some spaces, I feel the need to at least bring it up. Despite the difference in categories, they're all very similar in their dreamlike, almost real but not real at all atmosphere. Another commonality that all these liminal spaces share is that regardless of which category it falls under, due to you being the only person in them, it feels as though you're trespassing, or if you're not meant to be there in the first place. This feeling can also arise from the fact that people should be in these areas, but instead, they're completely empty. Now that liminal spaces and their categories they fall under have been described, how does Gary's mod perfectly present them? Gmod shares one of the main aspects a liminal space does: loneliness. While Gmod is an online game, it offers a single-player mode where an individual's creativity can run wild with a selection of source engine along with community-made maps. Many of these maps have the ambience of cars driving by, sounds of City 17 blaring distantly in the background, or things that would make you believe the world is very much alive, such as birds chirping nearby. But it isn't. Instead, you're the only person who populates the map. It leaves a feeling of loneliness and almost makes the map seem abandoned. I like to call this phenomenon source engine solitude. This, however, isn't the only place where source engine solitude appears. Look at most source engine games and you'll notice that the ambient sounds hint that much more is going on around, when in reality, you're simply standing in an empty map, alone. Games such as Team Fortress 2, Counter-Strike, and Day of Defeat all have this attribute of isolation. Here, take a listen. Along with Solitude, the textures of the game aid in the feeling of irreality. GMod was made in 2004, so the graphical fidelity has had plenty of time to age like milk when compared to more modern titles. The graphics of yesteryear lend themselves to emphasize the feeling of liminality, a transition between what's real and what's not. Along with this, the textures emulate a picture of a liminal space, that being almost always a grainy photograph taken with an older camera from the 90s. The texture work being from the early 2000s means that graininess is almost a given in each and every texture. The file size for each texture in Garry's Mod is 128 by 128 pixels, much smaller to today's modern textures, which are often sized at 1024 by 1024 or even 2048 by 2048 pixels for much more complex objects. For reference, there are Minecraft texture packs with larger texture sizes than Half-Life 2 textures that GMod uses. Also for reference, here's a 128 by 128 texture compared to a 1024 by 1024 texture. Quite the size difference. On the other hand, pictures of liminal spaces can appear as though they've been taken with a higher quality camera, which GMod can emulate through custom textures provided by map creators, as well as the community workshop. Post-processing mods can also accomplish a more realistic or a more analog feel depending on what the user wants to experience. Third-party mods such as Reshade are also able to be used to accomplish the same goal without the limitation of the source engine. Finally, within the active player count of over 30,000 consistent players and a fan base much higher than that, many community members share an interest in liminal spaces and desire to create custom maps where the user can explore and experience liminality firsthand. On the Steam Workshop for Garry's Mod, there are 341 total maps that have liminal in their title or description, meaning they were specifically made for those who have an interest and want to experience going through an interactive liminal space. The amount of other maps that aren't inherently designed for liminality may also possess spaces that can seem liminal, thus making the total amount of GMod maps to feature liminal spaces incalculable over the 45,000 community-made maps. In fact, maps that have been created to represent large cities filled with bustling life can be considered liminal, as there's no one to populate it aside from the sole player, thus making even the most unassuming maps liminal by nature. The potential for liminality in GMod is near limitless. To fully understand liminal spaces, I decided to download a map from the workshop and play through it while using a mod which allows me to play the game in VR for full immersion. The first map I played was Places from Your Dreams by Creepernator152, a very well received map revolving around this video's subject. While I won't be going over the whole map, I'll discuss a few spaces that piqued my interest as well as their classification as mentioned previously. One of the first locations to make me feel uneasy was this darkened pool area with an overabundance of tile pillars connecting to the similarly tiled roof. Due to not being able to see around each corner, it made me feel like something could pop out from the dark and both scare and kill me within seconds. Clearly, my unease was warranted as traveling through this location, I discovered a charred corpse A-posing in the water. Seeing his body made me question what happened to him. Did something in the water kill him? How and why is he charred? Is he just that bad at swimming? Questions, questions, questions. Needless to say, this interaction immediately made me want to leave the water and find a different place to get creeped out. This location is definitely written down as a dark liminal space given the lack of light, constant blind spots, and the actual fucking corpse laying in the water, showing clear signs that this was a dangerous location. Speaking of dangerous locations, take this unassuming child daycare. Initially, it seemed like a light liminal space due to the nature of the location, despite the dingy-ish lighting in some spots. However, the graffiti on the wall reading, "It's a trap, they'll let you on but they won't let you leave" is definitely alarming and transforms this innocent location into a more twisted place, with some sort of overbearing and controlling being, thus making it a mix between a light and a dark location. Seemingly innocent, yet upon further inspection, there's some sort of danger to be aware of. Maybe this dialogue on the wall was referring to the map as a whole, and how there's no way to escape this labyrinth of liminality. There were a few other locations that had some text scrawled on the wall, such as the women's bathroom, with text that read, "Leave now. They keep coming. No way to get back." Another mention of they, but who are they? What do they want? Are they cosmic beings of liminality? Again, questions, questions, and more questions. This map clearly wants to delve into the dark side of liminal spaces, and I believe it does that successfully through the constant low lighting, ominous warnings of some sort of being that keeps the player trapped within the confines of the labyrinth, as well as the corpses that litter some portions of the map, such as the pool area as mentioned before, as well as an endless ball pit coated in blood with another A-posing body. Overall, I can see why this map is so highly rated and upheld by so many players, as it creates suspense and a feeling of dread so well, and it also recreates pictures of liminal spaces quite well. It also creates a sense of being watched due to the graffiti on the wall, letting the player never feel a moment of comfort or complete solitude. From my experience through playing GMod fully immersed in the liminal spaces that Creepernator had to offer, the dark side of liminal locations are covered much more than the other types of locations, or at least they're more notable than others given their dangerous nature. I find it impressive how so much fear can be created from the layout of an area, ambient sounds, as well as letting the mind fear the worst. I knew that while I was playing I was completely alone, but the constant warning signs given by the writings on the walls made me feel like I had to be constantly wary of something in case anything were to attempt to kill me. Through exploring Gmod's ins and outs when it comes to liminality, the feeling of loneliness, the almost warped by dreams textures, and especially community truly make Gmod the perfect game to represent liminal spaces. Before I end today's discussion, I want to thank the librarian for inspiring me to make this video. The librarian is a YouTuber who has a very laid-back, calming way of narrating his videos, and one of his series is exploring liminal horror maps in Gmod VR. So thank you for giving me the idea to make this video. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe if you're feeling extra generous. It's not required, but it's always appreciated. Thanks for watching.